I'm Alex Miller. I'm the CTO of Grid Plus.
Yeah, I'm Matt Walters. I'm the lead architect of Grid Plus. The two of us together are responsible for most of the technical development. Alex is a pretty prolific engineer in the Ethereum community. He has been writing all of our smart contracts, and I've been building sort of the scalable systems that will help power this utility. And we'll be building up a team of smart people to help us do that in the future.
So we are Grid Plus, which is trying to create the world's first blockchain-based utility. We are a Consensus company, so we spun out of Consensus earlier this year, and Consensus itself has been working on projects in the energy space for 2 years, 2.5 years actually, since 2015. We are taking one of the most recent projects that Consensus has worked on and building our own company around the idea. And we are trying to create the future of energy, which looks more decentralized.
Grid Plus is a software company, not a hardware company, and the reason that's important is because there's a certain delineation of responsibilities in the power generation space. There's generators, there's distributors, and there's retail energy providers. This is sort of the layout of the different components in a deregulated energy market. Generators are power plants. They either use solar panels or wind or diesel and generate the power, and they send that out to a distributor, which maintains the power lines and runs the electricity from a rural area into an urban area. A retail energy provider has the job of buying from those distributors and selling to customers, and some additional responsibilities of doing the metering, doing the accounting, marketing, etc. For that, they tend to charge somewhere up to or around 100% markup. But since those retail energy providers are not a generator, they're not a distributor, they don't take part in owning all of that large infrastructure and hardware. So we want to be on the retailer side. But in addition to that, we're using software and automation techniques to build a much more efficient version of what exists out there today. Anyone who pays their utility bill knows that the company on the other end of that letter that probably they could have gotten an email about is not using modern software engineering practices. And there's all sorts of opportunities for automation to lower those costs. We want to be an extremely streamlined utility, retail energy provider. And part of that streamlining comes in using the Ethereum blockchain to do real-time payments and settlement.
We think that there is an economic sort of end state where people are generating solar electricity from their house. The reason we think this is that it turns out in our current centralized generation system, we are losing quite a bit of electricity from having to transmit it over long distances. This is just a property of physics. The longer you have to transmit electricity, the more you're going to lose. So we think that at least some of that electricity, it makes economic sense to generate that closer to the place where it is consumed. So what we imagine in the future is a more transactive grid where prosumers are generating electricity locally and then selling that locally as well. They're setting their own prices.
One of the great things about what we're building is that to the average consumer, although this may be one of the, if not the first major consumer application of blockchain, that's all going to be abstracted and hidden away behind just a simple to use mobile first friendly interface that lets them interact with a power utility in a way they'd like to use some other online service. It's simple, it's easy to use, they use it on their phone, and everything else is hidden away.
A homeowner who would have battery and a solar panel would be able to benefit from any changes in market price because they now have a control mechanism and they have a place to store the energy. So if the price goes up and they have energy in their battery, they can benefit from that and by selling it, right? So What that looks like on a macro perspective is actually that you get fewer price spikes, and the spikes are like less extreme. So you get a much more resilient, much more like evenly managed load on the grid. That actually has a lot of benefits further upstream. We burn a lot of energy just ramping up and ramping down when demand spikes, and we can kind of balance that out. Consensus is many things. One of those things is an incubator. So we, Grid Plus, spun out of Consensus as a company. This was one of the original intentions of Consensus. It also does consulting projects. I've worked on some of those. It also does infrastructure projects. Consensus is a really, really fun place to work because whatever you can imagine is a possibility for something that you can do with your life. So if there's some value that you can bring the world and you can convince some other people that it's valuable, then you can run with that. It's a really special place. A blockchain is nothing more than a data structure. It's a way to store data. Some people call it a database. So in and of itself, a blockchain is not that interesting. What's interesting is the networks that run on top of this. And you're able to, with a blockchain, store data immutably for all of time, as long as someone's running the network.
Bitcoin is a network that happens to use a blockchain. So the Bitcoin network is essentially the world's largest supercomputer. And it's millions of computers around the world that use a protocol to do basically one thing and one thing only, and that's verify that a transaction from me to you is real and not fake. And it's an amalgamation of a number of different technologies that existed before but were put together in a brand new way. Ethereum is essentially the same thing, but instead of having the world's largest supercomputer, this giant cloud of computers that work together to verify transactions and have that be the only thing it can do, Vitalik Buterin, the creator, said, well, we can abstract that and allow it to do any number of things. And you can tell it what to do via a programming language. So they're both networks of computers that know how to do something. In Bitcoin, it's verify transactions. In Ethereum, it is run a computer language to do any number of things that you might tell it to do.
We've been talking to a lot of people. It's been great to meet the people we've met and to catch up with the ones who I'd met before. It's been hugely beneficial to be here, and I appreciate Consensus letting me come and letting me give a talk earlier.